Well, good morning from Mirador Television in Lewis. And you see this empty chair? Well, that is for Stewart Dolby. And I am apparently his top banana. Now, if you don't know what a top banana is, you don't remember the old music halls. Of course, who remembers the old music halls? Well, there were several TV programs about them, music halls, but a top banana was the straight man for the comedian. I'm the straight man. He's the comedian. You listen to me and you'll get the facts. Listen to him and all you're going to get is a giggle. But then perhaps that's what we need at this hour of the morning. So good morning from Keith Hayes and Stewart Dolby, who is actually lurking. I know he's here and he will be, he's getting his coffee. And he loves a whiskey with his coffee. So
I do know.
He's splashing and he says, "Don't tell the world that I have whiskey in my coffee at this hour of the morning. I personally prefer cognac." There we are. This is Mirador Television, and we are on the air from Lewis in East Sussex. Many people we know watch from outside the region, so that's why we like to explain where we are and why we are. And let's start off very quickly, because with the weather, it's going to be a funny day. A fair amount of cloud, 15 degrees, it's nudging 16 as the day goes by, starting at 8. So not terribly cold this morning at all, well, in relative terms. The chances of rain increase as we go towards lunchtime. The chance of rain today is about, oh, here he is, look, yeah, turning up late as usual. And the chances of rain increases towards lunchtime. Lunchtime is about 17 or 18%. Now, yesterday we weren't supposed to have any rain at all, but it did start to spit at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So do be careful. Just because I say that it's not going to rain or the chances are very low, don't take that as absolute fact. Right. Good morning, Stewart.
Good morning, Keith. Now, you've got one thing right. I'll tell the jokes and you laugh. But as far as the whiskey's concerned,
you make me laugh anyway, whether you tell a joke or not.
The thing is that
you better come in a little bit, otherwise people are going to think that you're
right.
a next door neighbour's washing lady or something.
Right, I'll get over a bit here.
Yeah,
right?
that's it. A little bit further, cozy as we were the other day.
Right, okay. Now, I do drink alcoholic beverages, but whiskey is not one of them.
It's not one of mine either. All right. Well, let's get over the serious stuff first.
Right.
In the news this morning, the newspaper headlines is a race to jab the NHS, an MP accused of rule breach. So really, there's not too much new about this morning. The Mirror says race to jab 100,000 NHS staff, and that follows on yesterday's announcement from the government that all NHS frontline staff will need to be vaccinated and have the booster by next April. And of course, it's creating considerable concern, because there are people who quite legitimately say, I don't want a vaccination. I don't want to be vaccinated. And if they're on the front line, then presumably they're going to have to quit or be fired or whatever. So once again, with everything that happens in our modern life, there is a dilemma. There is a crisis. The Daily Express, just do it. 100,000 NHS staff told to get jabbed or lose their job. The Express, of course, tends to really support the government, support Boris. So they're sort of slightly taking the government's viewpoint this morning, although the headline doesn't reflect necessarily their editorial. Now, the care home cliff edge revealed. And what that story is all about is that there are lots of people in care homes who could easily, because of this diktat, lose their jobs, and we can have another shortage in care homes. Is that the fact? I don't know. But the has decided that that's a story we should take a look at, is that care homes, once again, will or could be a victim. The Times, brazen cocks accused of flouting common rules. Well, this was yesterday's story, where Geoffrey Cox sat in the Caribbean making a fortune, over £1 million, the estimates say, while doing things remotely during the past year. and never ever coming to Parliament, claiming all his expenses and claiming all sorts of things. Of course, there are calls now that this has broken all the rules of parliamentary procedure, and he should quit. And he's coming out fighting, and he's saying, "Quit? Not a bit of it. You listen to me. You listen to my excuses." But so brazen cocks accused of flouting the common rule. The Metro, Jeff in paradise. It goes on with following on that story with Jeffrey Cox in the Caribbean. I'd like to be in the Caribbean right now, sipping a sangria. What do you sip in the Caribbean?
Well, I find it very boring after a while.
Do you? What, sipping in the Caribbean or just sipping?
Well, no, I mean, they're very nice places and it's fantastic. But once you've been on the beach and had a few drinks, there's not a lot else to do.
Yeah.
It's a bit short and culture apart from anything else.
Well, I think for brandy in my coffee in the morning, I could forego culture.
Well, yeah, actually, Keith, I don't drink any alcohol in the morning.
Oh dear. You and I are on different planets, different time scales.
Just to give us a lot of stories there. Now, first of all, you're talking about the NHS getting jabbed and so forth. And there's another thing is going out on social media, I am told, not that I do much of it, that there have been 40,000 deaths caused by the vaccinations. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
Well, there's been quite a lot of it. There's a big currency in it now that, the vaccination is killing people.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds a bit bonkers to me, but like a bit more. But the thing about, I think, that the NHS getting jabbed next year. Now, I've heard some very funny stories about Lewis. Now, us old codgers, it was a very, very good beginning. I remember I just got a text from my surgery and saying, can you have your first test? When would you like to come? And I went down to River Lodge. I called it Blood River Lodge because I always had my blood test down there. Anyway, and they were so pleasant. They were so nice.
Blood or bloody?
Bloody
River Lodge. Right.
Anyway. And,
he swears first thing in the morning, even though he won't drink.
Right. The thing is that actually we were in and out with him called him, and it was wonderful. And then we had the second jab. That was also wonderful. And now we're due the booster because I'm 7 months into when I had the last one, which was in April, I think, April 1st, something like that. And I couldn't seem to get it for some reason. And the surgery kept saying, "Oh, just wait till you just get you." And somebody told me that it's actually the Pfizer thing. The Pfizer is being used. Well, we had AstraZeneca back in the day, back in the first jab. And said that the surgeries here haven't got the ability to store enough Pfizer things because you've got to have the 70% put them in the fridge or something,
right,
and freeze them. Now that is a definite possibility, I think, because at the end of I kept phoning them and they said, "No, you'll be told." And then the NHS comes up with a thing saying you must have your jab. They keep telling you you've got to have your jab. And I said, "I'd love to have my jab, but where am I going to be told?" And so I said, "Right, okay." I went through all the things you have to do, and finally, I managed to get they offered me places like Kroger and Seaford. And I want to go to Kroger. Still less do I want to go to Seaford. And finally, I got an appointment this weekend, actually, November 14th, at the Churchill Centre in Brighton.
Right.
So that's okay.
Well, actually, they could use my fridge because there's no bloody food in it. Right, the Guardian, global heating on track to top 2.4 centigrade despite COP26 pledges to reform. A report warns.
Who's that? Which guy is that?
That's the Guardian.
Oh,
yeah. And what they're saying is that it was just a talking shop this weekend or this last week in Glasgow. That despite the pledges that the global temperature is increasing and is going to increase, and we're all going to fry.
Did you hear that Greta Thunberg on the screens?
Do I? Sorry.
Did you see that Greta Thunberg?
I didn't.
Wasn't invited to go, right?
Yeah.
And she came out with it. This is absolutely ridiculous. It's just a charade. It's like Davos. All these people go there to have a chat and then they do nothing.
Absolutely.
And in fact, week one has shown that really they're not doing very much. First of all, they said we're going to do reforestation, but no clue about how. What's it going to take? It's a bit like the Lewis District Council. They say we're going to have zero emissions by 2030. They haven't got a clue how they're going to get there. They say we're going to have electric charging points, right? And plant trees. You know how many public electric electric points are? There are 7 for a population of 19,000 people. You know? God, what loud Clifford clan are they living in?
Well, you're on my favourite group
Subject,
now,
yeah.
Lewis District Council. I mean,
Yeah.
it is. I actually do talk to some colleagues, journal colleagues, and I say, "What's your local council like?" And they say, "Oh, well, pretty poor." And then I tell them what's going on down here. They double over in mirth. They can't believe it.
But I think everything started going wrong when we joined up with Eastbourne.
Oh, you're too damn true.
Do you realise they're absolutely skint, Eastbourne?
Yeah.
And they can't even get a decent financial advisor to make sure the people who are still in Lewis get their pensions paid.
Well,
it's terrible.
And as far as I'm aware, they still haven't filed their accounts for the last 2 years.
No, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I know where you got that information from, but I won't know.
Right, the Star. Oh, my lovely Star. I love their headlines. It's, will the last Echo hypocrite to leave COP26 please turn off the flights? And what's that saying is that all these people that were there going to save us from global warming, including the Green Party, were all flying in on expensive jets, pumping stuff out into the atmosphere. Yeah. Now, here's your old nemesis, the Financial Times. General Electric pulls the plug on conglomerates with a 3-way split. Do you know what that's about?
No.
No, I don't either. But obviously, it's one of the
read a bit more.
I can't get the fine print at this hour of the morning. It's my alcohol misted eyes can't quite read it.
I'm just trying to think what that means.
Let's see if I can give you a bit more. Yeah. An image of a man carrying a child on the Belarus-Poland border, where Polish troops are on guard amid claims from the EU that Belarus has engineered a crisis involving thousands of migrants. Its lead story says General Electric is to break up into 3 separate companies focused on healthcare, energy, and aviation. Does that help you?
I think the people who wrote that must have been pissed.
You don't take a drink in the morning, and I do.
Well, I worked for the Financial Times for 36 years. It's a great newspaper, probably the best around. It's not a silly, stupid sort of Daily Mail and Daily Telegraph having silly campaigns. Still less is this bloody Murdoch. It's not like a Murdoch paper who panders to the lowest common price. It's very, very balanced. But sometimes, you know, you get some rather extraordinary militant climbing over the wall and getting his bloody piece into the paper. So I wouldn't say, I don't know what that means at all.
Now, this one I think you probably can help people with. The Daily Mail. Fury grows over raid on historic UK insurer. And apparently insurer LV, currently owned by its 1.2 million members, to a private equity predator, Bain Capital. And that's the lead story in the Daily Mail. Can you enlighten us on that?
Well, yes, because you can't trust these hedge fund managers. They're sort of, in a funny, strange way, they're sort of asset strippers. They buy over these things, chop out the good bits, keep the good bits, and chop out the not so good bits. So it's not a good thing to happen.
All right. Okay, so you're with the Mail on that one. The Daily Telegraph, Oxford owes explanation to Jewish students for Mosley cash. So I assume that without reading too far down, that Oxford University has got some stuff from the Mosley family, very controversial, I suppose, since Oswald, and that now students have found out that some money from the Mosley family have gone into Oxford, and they're saying you better apologise to Muslim students.
It's a bit like anti-racism, anti-feminism, anti-this, anti-that, isn't it? It's like the county council here. You can't actually invest in fossil fuels anymore. etc., etc.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I think probably I'm counterintuitive about this because I've been writing about renewable energy so long. I know there hasn't been enough investment, and I don't think the energy mix can be met by renewable energy. I think there will have to be some kind of bridge, and gas bridge would be the easiest one because it's the least polluting. But, well, I'll come to this when I talk my piece later on. But, you know, it's very, very vague that we can actually meet, particularly the Lewis District Council. They certainly not going to meet it, I reckon, but anyway.
Well, I mean, to be quite honest with you, I think that we must forgive them to some extent because politicians are politicians, aren't they? And they make extravagant claims, and then they wave their hands and sort of say to the executive, "Get on with it." I have to say that with one or two exceptions, and there are one or two exceptions, there are one or two decent people in the executive or the officers, as it were, the administration of Lewis District Council, who actually do get on and try hard to do things. I could name one or two, but I won't. But basically, it's so disorganized, and as you say, it's now run from Eastbourne. And when you phone up and say there's a pothole outside Lewis Town Hall, is they say, could you explain exactly where the town hall is in Lewis?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Well, talking about politicians and politicians, yeah, and they're all on the blooming make. You listen, you think about Geoffrey Cox, and there was a very good piece in the Financial Times yesterday by Martin Bell, my old comrade in arms. I used to work for the BBC and eventually became the only independent. Would you remember?
Yes, he became an independent MP, didn't he?
Yeah, and he said, look, lobbying is fine, and he used to lobby in favour of the salt mine or whatever it was in his constituency. He says that when money is taken for the lobbying and so forth, and they're all at it. Don't worry. Do you remember the expenses figure? You know, when Quintin Hogg charged for a moat around his bloody manor house, wherever it was. And it goes on. And then Ken Clark, all right, this is sort of, he went and got a job on the board of a cigarette company, and they make a fortune. I've been a non-executive director of companies, okay, much not on a big scale. And you're paid a fortune for doing absolutely bugger all. I mean, I had to only turn up about 3 days a month or something like that for meetings and so on. And I was getting something like 24 grand.
Yeah.
You know.
It's a gravy train, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
We better look for the gravy, I think.
I'm not a politician, God knows if I had been.
No, actually, we would never be appointed to those things because we tell it like it is.
Actually, they at the FT, they used to call me. I said they had great political skills because I became known as rumor control, and it's because I also said which jobs were going to be filled, and I'm going to say, well, Urich's going to get the job in Washington. And they said, how do you know that? And I said, well, I didn't know that. All I do is watch who's coming and going to see the editor. It's just very simple. But perhaps when I was saying that, he's very political, that job, I said, well, perhaps I'm just a very good journalist. Very fun, then.
You're like me, I get the weather by watching the moss grow on the back of the trees.
Well, what's he doing here? You know?
Right, The Sun, the last paper to be reviewed.
Oh no, that's the Murdoch paper.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on
All
that.
right, but Katie, I could have killed somebody, is Katie Price, who was in that horrific accident. And from what I can remember, we'd be very careful we don't libel the lady, but that there are drugs and alcohol involved in this. And apparently the Sun has decided enough with climate change, enough with COVID, let's go to Katie and see what she has to say about her accident.
Well, as an alumnus of page 3 on the Sun, she obviously knows what she's talking about. But I mean, see, I don't follow celebrity programs or celebrity newspapers because it seems to me to be sort of silly. It's all about titillation, and do I really care about Wayne Rooney going off to a brothel? No, I don't. And do I really care well, I can't say about poor Katie Price. I'm sure it's awful. But I don't even know who she is, really.
No, I don't either. I mean, is some of the so-called celebrities now. I mean, you're a celebrity if you go on Get Me Out of Here or something, and you stuck your head into a cage of bees and hope that they'd bloody sting you.
Well,
I mean,
as Malcolm Muggeridge's widow once said, too many people are famous for being famous now.
and actually, it's all 2 minutes worth, isn't it?
Yeah.
They remember it for years to come.
Yeah.
Unlike us, who try hard when we go out of this studio and walk down the streets in Lewis, is trying to hide who we are in case somebody punches us on the nose for what we said.
No, it's I always to a Bob Dylan. I mean, I met so many celebrities. Well, no one say celebrity, but I know some very famous people. But Bob Dylan used to say, "A hero's not a hero once you've met them." You know,
That's right.
And they're all the same as everybody else.
That's right.
And the really, really successful people are very, very, very nice to know. Now, I'm a terrible name dropper sometimes, but I got to know John le Carre because when he got fed up with Tinker Tailor's Spine, he wanted to go to the wars. And at that stage, I was a war correspondent. And he wanted to sort of, he came to Cambodia, he wrote a very good book called The Honourable Schoolboy about Cambodia. And he used to have dinner with us and he said, "No, tell me, Stewart, how do you fiddle expenses?" That kind of thing. And he was just one of the boys, you know. And one of my very good friends is Tom McCullum, the famous photographer. And he's a very, very nice person. And he's just one of my mates, you know.
Yeah.
He's just a pal. That's the way I see him. That's the way he wants to be seen.
Well, it depends whether they got real talent or whether it's flim-flam.
Yeah.
And there's too much flim-flam around.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I need to ask you is that on bonfire night, somebody offered £5,000 for my trilby. And I said, no deal, because I want more than Harrison Ford got, which was 150,000. So I want 150,000 plus one. But now, looking at your hat, how much do you think yours is worth?
I've got no idea, but I tell you, to my astonishment, just the loads of people say, "I like your hat. I like your hat." Oh, I said I bought it in the charity shop for a tenner.
Well, actually, I couldn't find mine this morning to begin with when I first got up, but I put my briefcase on it. It was in really battered condition, but hats like ours age gracefully and get better as they go along, like wine.
Well, I've actually no. Listen, I like hats. Not because I'm on board, but I just rather like them.
I do too.
But I like scarves as well. I can't tell you why.
Yeah, no. I mean, perhaps it's something to do with our generation or something. I don't know. The other thing that you don't see very often anymore is a cravat.
Absolutely not. Yeah, you don't, do you?
You don't indeed. Point. Yeah. I think I got one lurking somewhere in a cupboard. I must look it out, and perhaps I'll start to wear a cravat again.
Well, I always like watching them on the Agatha Christie the films, you know.
Yes,
they were sort of posh people in the 30s and 50s.
Well, it is interesting because I can talk about them now. On South Street in Lewis, there was a couple, Heather and Ronald Robinson, and in fact, not in this studio, but at home. Hanging on the wall, I've got 2 or 3 Robinson paintings. And he didn't start painting until about 90, age 90. And he didn't die until he was 108. Heather, God bless her, didn't quite make the century. She died when she was 98.
98?
Yeah, but Ronald showed me some photographs of, as a young man, he would go to tea parties and things. And this one particular one was at one of those posh houses on the banks of the Thames. And he's wearing spats.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, you did things properly in those days.
Well, when Charlie Watts lived in Lewis, do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
He was a real dandy, And do you remember he wore spats and lovely suits and all the rest of it? And do you remember that famous evening when there was a punch up in the Chinese in the high street there? And Charlie was running for his life as they came out with hatchets. I'll never forget that.
Actually, though, the other chap and many people will remember Sid Stonehouse. And Sid was always absolutely immaculate. And I mean, the great characters that I met, and they became friends in Lewis, but there was Tony Burton, whose daughter owned Capriccio, right?
Yeah, but then he was the boss of the Crown at once.
He was a boss of the Crown, and in fact, I am told it was just before my time. I'm told that he had a grand piano in the main bar there, and that all sorts of well-known celebrities would come down on the weekend and sing and dance. And
oh yeah, he had been in Rhodesia, you see, which before it really fell apart, and it was very good living out there. And all the rest of it, he sort of imported it back over here.
Right.
He used to live in New Road, where I live.
Yes, that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
And so Sid was part of that, and then the man who owned or was he owned it, I think, the Pelham Arms, whose name was Jack, and I can't remember his last name. But the three of them in retirement used to march around Lewis and sometimes Seaford and sometimes New Haven, and they were known as Freeman, Hardy, and Willis. And for those youngsters who may be watching, no, not we don't get too many youngsters, but Freeman, Hardy, and Willis was a very well-known chain store. Is that right? Which doesn't exist anymore.
There were shoes.
Shoes, shoes. Yeah. Things for your tootsies. I mean, actually, Lewis had it all, and I hope that the changing face of Lewis doesn't mean to say that the characters will disappear, because there are still quite a few characters around. And they pop up on Facebook from time to time. And I thought it was absolutely hilarious that Cliff decided to have a go at Mick Symes in this year's bonfire. That he's Mr. Mouth That Roars, and here we are, the mouth that roars. And Mick, I'm very happy to say, because I like Mick Symes. He's a good guy, a great character, and he got the accolade of being wow. Now, to me, I don't like blushing violets. I don't like those people that sit in the corner and say nothing until they leave, and then they criticize everything that happened in an evening. Spit it out.
Now, tell me about Bonfire. I've been here a long time. I've not lived here a lot all the time, but I've owned my house. I first lived here in 1966. Because I was one of the first undergraduates at Sussex University, and in the 60s it was very good to be alive. And I lived a life, to all the gigs and so forth. In my third year, my tutor said to me, "I think you're going to be a first." Not that I was going to get the first, I'll be the first not to get anything, because everybody got a degree in those days at a new university. Anyway, I moved here and I got what was known as a tutu. And I was a strange sort of fluke, so I walked into a job at the Financial Times. Much later, as an alumnus, I've been contributing to the alumni fund. And I made friends with the previous vice chancellor, Michael Farthing, and he was very nice, and we were involved in various things together. And I said, well, I didn't get a very good degree, but I did help Jimi Hendrix for 150 quid. And he said, well, that's a real achievement. So they were good days. But then after I made some money as a war correspondent, because it's not that expensive so much as that exchange rates go down. Okay? I bought the little house here, and it's been a family home ever since, really. Well, sometimes I am known as the DFL, I'm afraid, but it's too bad. I think the DFL debate is a bit silly, because these people do bring money into the town, don't they? Now, apparently in the pandemic, there are a lot of people, according to Charlie Wycherley, a lot of people coming here because the schools are so good. Quite right. They're entitled to do that, aren't they?
Well, in my view, because I'm like you, I've lived in various parts of the world, and in Canada, when I first went there, I was known as a DP, a displaced person. Okay, it didn't matter what nationality I was a DP. Then when I was in Northern Ireland, I was known as a runner-in. And the funny thing is that the indigenous people, if you could call it that, they really do have this resentment about people coming in. But I mean, how do you stop a society becoming stagnant if you don't actually have new ideas, new thoughts, and so on.
But societies are like that. Like a very good friend of mine called Kevin Keir. He worked for the Financial Times, and he was out in the Far East for them, and he married a Indonesian Chinese lady, very, very nice lady. And he came back to London, and he was doing up his family home in Sligo in the west of Ireland. And they were doing this up, and a builder came along and looked at his wife and says, "Now you don't come from around here, do you now?" She said, "No." She said, "No, I can tell."
But no, I mean, Lewis, there is a changing face of Lewis, and it's bound to happen when new people come in with new thoughts and new ideas. The only people that I object to are those that come in and immediately object to the church bells first thing in the morning. They bloody well knew that the church bells sounded at that time, you know, or the cock crowing.
Just to go back to bonfire for a while, everybody tells me that the naughty boys are the cliff bonfire. Is it because, why are they naughty? What have they done? They won't join the Grand Parade or something.
Yeah, they do and they don't. They go up as far as the War Memorial.
Well, that's it, yeah,
they march back again. I can't actually answer that fully. What I do know, Stewart, is that they, particularly in the past, particularly when the Riot Act was read, and Cliff was seen as different to Lewis.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you lived in Cliff or you lived in
Lewis.
Oh,
I see. Yeah. They were Lewis and Cliff. Yeah.
And part of the tradition, as I understand it, so my throat will be slit if I've got it wrong, but the worthies of Lewis said, "We ain't having them rowdy bonfire boys from Cliff in our town this year."
Oh, absolutely.
And they sent down a little steward who was about 4 foot nothing, and he stood on Cliff Bridge, and the bonfire boys of Cliff tried to get into Lewis, and he just stood there and said, "You know, over my dead body." So they looked for a little while to see whether in fact it should be over his dead body, but then they gave in, and that is the tradition of when they throw the tar barrel into the river, that they were turned back by this brave little 4 foot nothing man standing there, with the worthies of the council safely ensconced in the town hall.
Because we remember bonfire started with the burning of the Myres, and then it merged in with Guy Fawkes.
That's right, yeah.
But it was a very, very Protestant town. I remember when I first came here, there were signs in the windows saying, "No popery here," and the children were kept in, and so on. And it was like that. It was very, very sectarian.
Yeah. Well, actually,
but I mean, Ian Paisley bought the Jurai Chapel, and his son Kyle used to preach there. Strangely, when Paisley turned up for bonfire, he marched out down quick,
showing the town gates.
Yeah.
I mean, but one of the interesting things about bonfire, and you're quite right, it goes back to Queen Mary.
Yeah,
Mary the First. Bloody Mary. And it is recorded that when she died, the bells rang and rousers were let off. And a rouser is what you and I would call a banger. And that was 30 or 40 years before Guy Fawkes. So the tradition here is very, very strong.
It was 1558, 1588 or 1588. Yeah, it would have been, wouldn't it? 12, 15, yeah.
Well, Henry pulled down the priory in the 1550s, didn't he? That sounds about right. Okay, right. Well, let's take a little break from us two, and so on. And while I was hoking around, because the headlines are so different this morning, it was difficult to know what to, because some of them are yesterday's stories with the sleaze and COVID and so on, and Katie Price is just nowhere. I was looking around for, is there anything of any worth? And what I did was I came across 2 or 3 promos that we did about 2 years ago, for our programs, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So let's just take a look for 5 minutes at one of them anyway.
It's been madly exciting here at Mirador. We have launched our local service for Lewis. We have upped our game on becoming international. And we are well prepared to beat lockdown. So remember, you are watching the biggest little TV in the world. Enjoy! As well as enjoying his booze, the old man has an obsession with the other ways he's using his lips. No, 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 it's not what you think. Take a look.
Hey, Ellie, come on, give us a kiss. Come on. First thing in the morning.
Well, my dear, people can always dream. I just wanted to come in here to see if you're boring people again.
No, I would never bore people. I don't think.
Well, depends who you ask, I guess.
Now, this is sort of a piece of art which, today, with all due respect, it's got a lady's breast showing. But in the early part of the 1900s, the most famous statue in the world, probably, Rodin's The Kiss, was here in Lewis. And it was bought by a mad American. And it was then put on show very briefly before everybody getting upset that it was obscene, and then it was tucked away in a shed.
So I've heard.
Yeah, have you seen The Kiss? Have you looked at the statue?
If I say no, is that a problem?
Oh yes, it is.
Then I did.
But the good burghers of Lewis decided that it was obscene. I mean, a little old lady, I don't think she was that old actually, she was rather prim. She marched down to the council and said, here. If you're going to show that, I'm going to complain.
Well, Stewart was this program 2 years ago, and the where are they now? Is unfortunately I don't know where the lady there, Annie Verrill, is, because she's the most talented lady, and she's been lost to Mirador, and I'm very sad because. Talented people we could do with, but it is interesting, isn't it, what we were doing 2 years ago before lockdown got hold of us and devastated things, and now we're fighting. We're on the way back. But Annie was a real character, very very feisty, and you can see there that she was called the boss, and I was called the curmudgeon, and she bullied me unmercifully. Mercifully, she bullied me, and people used to say, "Listen, are you two making it up when you're on the screen, or do you really not like one another?" And actually, it was a mixture of both, because we fought like cat and dog off screen.
But take it easy, right? You're bordering on to calling them Miss Whiplash, you know.
Right, Stuart. Tell me about what's happening on the energy front, because strangely enough, it remains important. It remains important for absolutely everybody when it comes to the energy bills and so on and so forth, and yet it gets pushed off the front pages, so we lose track of what's happening.
I'm going to be talking about this soon after this, but basically, it's the energy policy in this country has been a chaos. The governments, not just one government, have not properly regulated energy policy. They've allowed this oligopolistic cartel to actually push up prices as they see fit. And the Ofgem has not managed to control them. Now, I will be telling you later on about this. It's quite serious business, because we thought that the cartel had sort of been muted a bit, but it's quite the other way around. It's become strengthened because all the other ones that you know what the story is, that Cameron was asked the Competition and Mergers Authority what he should do about an energy cap, and they said, well, tell everybody to go to smaller suppliers, cheaper suppliers. A load of them flooded into the market, but when the gas spiked, they couldn't meet the deals that they put out, right? Because they weren't financed enough and they weren't capable. And they're all going bust now. So we're back to a situation where we've got this cartel. And I'll be talking about this later. It's very, very interesting because it means, well, it means something else, but it means that, you know, energy prices are not going to come down. And it's very worrying. And also, the background to all this is, you know, again, you come back to the question of the energy mix. That can renewable energy actually meet the mix? This is the big thing. That from what we hear from COP26, they're not doing enough to ensure that it does. I mean, it is. It's like, you know, did you see Greta Thunberg on the television? As I said earlier, she said this is just a you know, a bloody week off, couple of weeks off for the rich and famous, basically, to do nothing.
Well, I suppose in a democracy that it is good to have a debating ground, as it were. But if people are going to debate and come to a conclusion, the system has got to be that some of those things will be implemented. Well, and it actually it's becoming rarer and rarer that these things are implemented.
Well, it is,
yeah.
Well, for example, you see, the president of China didn't turn up. All right, his head of the climate change did, but then, you know, they're the biggest polluter in the world, the biggest country in the world. And when I was talking to one of my students at Sussex University, she said, you've got to remember, Stuart, there's an awful lot of us. So while they are bringing in lots of windmills and all the rest of it, they're still having lots of coal. And like Modi, he went at the Paris summit said, so the rich countries, look, you've had 150 years to actually for the planet, and that's why they got some money out of States. And of course, one of the only good things is that Trump's not around anymore, so at least America's back in the game, which is really a bonus. But it's still they don't seem to be cohering in what they're doing.
Well,
you know,
it is as you say, it's like Davos is a talking shop. I mean, one of the things that I particularly, and I sort of raised a little silent hooray when they started to say the first thing they would try to address is deforestation and try to reverse that. Because it's not just about the climate, it's about animals and wildlife and actually, bit by bit, getting to civilizations that haven't seen outside their own little villages for, you know, hundreds of years. And I'm not at all sure that we have the right to go and disturb those communities. People say, "Oh, well, you know, now they can see all the modern things," and yet they seem to do very well. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, reforestation is something I'm very interested in, and there's a very good book actually coming out now. It's come out by Fred Pierce called a Trillion Trees, and what he writes is about.
It's not boring me. I'm just a little bit tired.
Is a rewilding. And he said there's a little guy up in Scotland who actually cleared all the pasture and all the things where the sheep, you know, the Highlands were populated by sheep, because they were cheaper than people, sort of thing. And he said he cleared it all, planted some cherry trees, I think it was, or ash trees or something, a few, and he left the rest of it, and the rest of it rewilded by itself. Then other places in Scotland started doing it, and they're huge actually forests now. And they work, unlike the great conifers that were published, because they were the disaster. And they're now rewilding because they cleared the pastures. Well, why didn't somebody think about this? It's not a question of planting new trees, Keith. It's a question of, and it's working. And it's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Isn't it true that, because I'm no expert, isn't it true that the beaver population now is beginning to increase again in Britain?
Well, that's due to the census of David Attenborough, isn't it? He's actually going out and getting a lot of beavers.
Yeah.
It's a very tricky business, beavers. They get very nasty, you know. Did you ever read what's his name? Ring of Bright Water Man, Gavin Maxwell, when he took on these beavers in remote Scotland, and one of his assistants got his fingers chopped off and so on. Yeah.
Oh, they've got those nasty little gnawing teeth, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I can remember particularly, I spent one summer in northern British Columbia, a place called Terrace, and doing some hoking around. And suddenly the people I was staying with would say, and there they would recognise that the beavers had built a lodge and had dammed a stream or whatever, and it was fascinating to go up and see, where they lived, where they worked, what they did. And slap the water with that famous tail of theirs to alert everybody that we were around. I've always been very fond of the beaver, and I'm glad that we've got it back in this country.
Oh, so am I.
Yeah. But because the big problem is, I see that people are trying to reintroduce some, not leopards and things, but some of the big cats that were here. Because the first thing they do is that they go and they raid the farms and they kill the. So it's always it's very difficult to say, yes, it's important. And then the farmer says, well, what about my livestock, which is my livelihood? So it's all a very difficult question. Right. Okay. Let's just let's see what time it is. It's coming up to about 10 to 8. It's amazing where the time goes when we're having fun. Jack DeManio lives. You're quite right. You see, I'm the top banana, and I get it wrong. Is the comedian here? So, what caught your eye this morning in the news, Stewart? That anything that you felt that you should impart?
Well, I think the sleeve stuff is interesting, but like you were saying last time we spoke, but is this a defining moment for Boris? But I can't see that it is, because it seems to be systemic, doesn't it? We talked about Tony Blair going to these £1 million mansions of the rich and famous. They're all coming out of lords and dames, coming away when they come back to London. And Geoffrey Cox, I mean, that is just crass, isn't it? He doesn't need the money, for God's sake. I mean, he's been corrupt all his flipping life by the sound of things. But it's the system, and again, it's a failure of, well, in this case, it's a failure of Parliament to regulate this thing. And it's a bit concerning.
Have you ever tried to put yourself into the position, say, of a young footballer? He gets £20,000 a week, which you and I, even at the height of our great earnings, wouldn't have made. And then his agent gets it up to 30,000. What's he going to do with those extra 10,000 he couldn't do with the 20,000 that he's got in the first place?
Well, I think the footballers, the Premier League has just become ridiculous. I mean, that kind of money. I mean, they might be very talented, but they're not worth that kind of money. Yeah. And it's just sort of capitalism gone run riot, isn't it? And I think a lot of them actually realise this. Why, what's somebody like gets 100,000 a week or something, don't they?
Oh, yeah. I was plucking a figure out of the air.
But I remember John Humphreys on a Today programme when they were moaning about his salary. Said, well, it is a market, and this is what the market does. Yeah. Market decides. And but this is the interesting thing about capitalism, isn't it? As I'm a liberal myself, I approve of capitalism. I think it is much better than command economy. Capitalism works, generally speaking. What I am objected to is the excesses of capitalism. In a sense, you look at Philip Green, the 3 billion quid, and he fires all the people wherever it was, British Home Stores and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And while he's having a nice time in television. But what is interesting, Keith, is that they haven't found a way of suppressing it or getting rid of the excesses they haven't done it through the tax system, for example. Right, you can actually tax the very rich people, but there's not enough of them to make a difference, if you see what I mean.
No, I agree, and the excesses of any form of government is. One could argue that socialism is a good form of governance, if that's what you opt for. But it's the excesses when it gets to totalitarian communism. And I mean, let's face it, you've worked in countries that I haven't worked in, and there it's totalitarianism. I mean, Pol Pot in Cambodia, and Ho Chi in Vietnam, and it is. I mean, the excesses there were huge, weren't they?
Depends when you're talking about. I mean, when are you talking after the American pullout? Or?
Well, at the time they were a totalitarian country. I mean, nowadays, both Cambodia and Vietnam, we embrace them as sister and brother nations.
Yeah, but they are communist countries, and the problem is that totalitarianism also goes with enormous corruption, and that's what you've got a problem with, basically. That you see, we are very lucky to live in a liberal country. We have freedom of speech. We have a proper democracy, and we have equality of opportunity. Broadly speaking, it could do much to go further. But living in one of those countries is not a lot of fun. I mean, last time I was in Vietnam I used to get invited back to go to the National Day. No, it's April 30th. Every year is the anniversary of when the Americans pulled out in 1975, April 30th. And you have to, it's quite wonderful because they invite you back, and they put everything but the beer. The cost is that you have to sit in the blazing sun watching these people doing the fog marching down the street and dancing and things. Anyway, but it's not funny because the people there are, the government's very corrupt, and the people there are still living under a totalitarian regime. It's not quite as severe as it was, but they're not sort of free as it's supposed to be.
Yeah, quite. All right. Well, let's take a quick second look down memory lane because some people in this little clip are coming back to us.
Right.
To come in here to see if you're boring people again.
No, I would never bore people.
Hello and welcome to our third episode of Bottled Poetry.
Folks Woods, if you can hear me over this, he's coming back next week.
I like you already.
And he's going to be a co-host on this program as well as doing his wine program. Strictly Chat and Dance. I'm glad to say that the girls are absolutely flourishing.
To get that upper body movement,
if you go onto their website, they do some exciting and interesting things.
It takes years for the professionals to get it. It's not a natural.
Let me just explain briefly. Special expenses are levied by Lewis District Council on every council taxpayer in Lewis for the maintenance of open spaces.
Mayor at the moment has to be a bit careful what he says, but he'll be back. Mark Landsman, who is a legend in the United States.
And now I'm thinking I would like to be back today, right now, in that main lobby, looking up the staircase and seeing President Donald Trump.
Yes, we'll have some food tasting. We're very pleased to go. We've got a panel of 3 expert tasters, a mayor, a broadcaster, and a salesman. There we go, and some of those people will be back. You'll be pleased to know, because then you can make fun of them instead of me.
No, you don't seem to understand. You're Stan Laurel and I'm Oliver Hardy, or the other way around. Which you're the straight man and I'm the clown.
Yeah, that's right. I'm the top banana.
No,
the man you make fun of.
I'm Stan. You're Oliver Hardy. I'll handle this.
Well, it's been a great pleasure to be with you this morning. We're coming up to the end of the program, and I've got hiccups, and I'm quite sure it must be the brandy that I had in my breakfast. And as Stewart says, on the more serious side of things, he will be with you later today. on energy matters, and we'll highlight some of the key issues that you need to be aware of at home over the prices of energy, what's happening in the background in terms of trying to get renewable energy going, some of the extravagant claims made by some politicians, and so on. So, Stuart, as always, it's a delight to have you in the morning. I got away relatively unscathed this morning, but sometimes if I excuse the expression, he takes the piss so much that I am smarting for half the morning.
So what do? You have to just say now, it's goodbye from him and goodbye from him.
Yeah. Well, we've got 2 or 3 minutes yet. It's only 8:56. Right. Let's just take a little review of the weather, because it might just possibly rain towards noon. But the chances are still only about 15 or 20%. The day will be scattered cloud, a fairly consistent cloud, so not too much sunshine today. A high of about 14 degrees, and a gentle breeze. And I love it when it's a gentle breeze, because your hat and mine then stays firmly on our heads.
That's right.
And actually, you didn't answer my question. How do you value your hat? How much would you sell your hat for?
Oh, I'm not sure. I got it at auction. I don't know. It's not for sale. Let's put it that way.
In other words, priceless.
Well, people come along and say, "I like your hat. I like your hat." I've got a growing number of admirers.
Well, I assure you, all the ladies that actually lust after him, it's like his hat. He is priceless. Yes.
No, I bought it in a charity shop. I think it was tenner.
Yeah, and why not? I think it's amazing the people that admit that they get their clothes from charity shops.
No, charity shops are wonderful, because when we were growing up, they were places for hand-me-downs, like the Salvation Army. There was brother stuff was handed down to you, and finally ended up in the charity shop, or the Salvation Army shop, as it then was. But now they're proper recycling centres, and it's fantastic, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, people. My wife is the queen of the charity shop. Boy, she hoovers up all around. And mind you, she's got lots of grandchildren. So, but she comes back and she says, "Oh, look, I've got this Gucci shirt or what's it shirt. They're £40, £40 new, and people just get them as Christmas presents and take them straight to the charity shop." And she said, "I got it for a £5." And I said, "But darling, I don't need any more shirts. I can barely wear the number you've got already."
Okie doke. Well, we have come to the end of an interesting morning on Wednesday, the 10th of November. It is now 8:59. You can go out there this morning. I don't think that you need a massive overcoat, but be careful about just perhaps a little scattering rain towards lunchtime, and that breeze if you are a hat wearer like Stewart and myself. But Stewart Dolby and Keith Hayes, yin and yang, or Stan and Laurel, or whatever. But this hour goes by very quickly when I'm with him, because I'm always on my guard in case he's going to probe too deeply. Join us tomorrow morning with Break an Egg, and we look forward to having you with us on Mirador. I'm not quite sure which one we have to play to get out, but let's.
Okay, so
Toodle pip.
Toodle pip.
Toodle pip.